And as people come in, feel free to put your video on. It's always really lovely to see faces. The topic today being collaboration. We get that it's all about he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Neat. Love seeing people moving. Okay. So I will open us with a karakia and noting that others will just join as they do, and everyone knows to come in with their mics off, so we'll be able to get on. So me I noi tātou. Tū tawa mai I runga. Tū tawa mai I raro. Tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Haumi e hui e, dae e. And now I'll pass to Michelle.
Kia ora and good morning, everybody. Ko Michelle Gallagher tuku ingoa. I am the Program Coordinator with the Centre for Social Impact, and we'd like to welcome you all here today for this Te Pūaha Talks session. So these workshops are free, provided to community by the Centre for Social Impact with support from Foundation North. And to date, we have presented on a really wide range of topics, from grant writing through to communications, evaluation, things around social impact. So we'll put a link in the chat about how you can access those if anything piqued your interest there. But before we start, could I just ask if you could take part in a quick poll? Foundation North are interested to see how many of their grantees are taking advantage and coming along. So hopefully you can now see that popping up on your screen. Oh yes, thank you everyone. You were quick off the mark this morning. Beautiful. Thank you. Lovely, we'll end that now. And yeah, thank you all for being here, and handing back to you, Miranda.
Oh, tēnā koe, Michelle. And ata mārie kia koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou. Just amazing thanks to you all for investing in this hour. It's a fascinating piece. Like, collaboration is, you would think is a common bit, right? And the sheer interest is really exciting and heartening, and also an indication. We think Michelle and I were chatting before, what's going on to make this of such interest, and we think there's so much going on in the world that feels like it's a bit out of control, and how can we contribute and have some control? And we hear that collaboration is a key, so let's unpack that a bit today. So before I get into a proper introduction to myself, I want to also note that when you collaborate, it's crucial to know who's in the space with you. Again, he tangata. So while I'm doing my mihi, I would request you guys to go to the chat and put in he aha tō mahi. So what sector is your work? And no hea koe I nāianei. So where are you coming from at the moment? Because again, these talks are attractive to people across Aotearoa, and sometimes we get globals coming in. It's always really interesting to see that as well. So while I'm doing my mihi, it'd be really great if you could put that in the chat. So he aha tō mahi and no hea koe I nāianei. And of course, we're respecting Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, which is also a beautiful part of being in this gorgeous country. So kia ora koutou anō. Ki te rangi I tūnei, ki te papa e tākato nei, ki te honga mate ko kingi tūheitia, haere, haere, haere atura. Ki nā kānohi ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko airanga, te whakapapa ranga mai, engari ko te mātawa Maui, te whenua tupu. Ko roahine, te maunga, ko toki toki te awa, ko te moana nui aki wa te moana, ko pō rerere te kāinga. I nā rā o mua ko tēnei mōkai, e mahi ana mō te iwi ko kaitahu. Ka tahi kā, ka mahi a hau mō te tini a Tangaroa, me te papa atawhai. I nāianei, e mahi ana hau mō te hōtaka moana o Waiheke, rawa ko the Centre for Social Impact. Ko Miranda, Cassidy-O'Connell, tā ko ingoa. I'm going to share now. He aha me nui mō taku mahi. Me he mea ka moe moe ahau, ka ahau anake. Me he mea ka moe moe a tātou, ka taia e tātou. So this whakatauki, fittingly, and with so much emphasis on the kingitanga at the moment from Te Pūaha Herangi, it embodies my beliefs around collaboration. So it's been my pleasure, as I said in my mihi then. I hail originally from Ireland 6 generations ago, and now my place is in Hawke's Bay. And I really work in collaboration. And so thank you guys for showing in the chat just all that massive diversity that's in the room today. So we'll get straight into the talk. So what are we here to talk about today? Collaboration. Yeah. So the most important thing, I believe, is knowing when you should collaborate. Yeah. So for all of you coming in here, you've been attracted because you're likely involved in some complex spaces. You've got stuff going on in your life and you've either been told you should collaborate, you instinctively know you should collaborate. Well, what we're going to unpack a little bit is when is a good time to collaborate? And then we'll also say, well, what does it even mean? Yeah, so just a little bit of that underneath. But I request of you to grab your pen and paper or your Remarkable or your iPad, whatever is the digital tool or hard tool that you use, and take notes to relate it to your work. Yeah. It's no point in my world talking about these intangibles, amorphous concepts, unless we ground them in reality. You guys have invested this hour. Take notes. Think about the issues that you're working in and how these bits and pieces, these tips and comments and things that I'm going to share with you relate to your mahi. Make it worth it. So after we've unpacked the when and what, we'll have a look at, well, what's involved in being effective at collaborating. This term collaborative fitness is one I coined a while ago, and we'll look at that. And then to round it off, we'll look at some of the traps and benefits of collaboration. So first up, collaboration is not needed all the time, right? Imagine how frustratingly slow the world would be if we had to collaborate on everything. So you need to have some situational awareness to understand your context to decide when you want to collaborate. Heaps of you on here would have come across this model. I can see some nodding heads. It's got a funny title. It's called Cynefin Framework. And Cynefin is a Welsh word that signifies multiple factors in our environment, right? So there's always a lot going on in our worlds. Really simple example, I ask you to just lift your eyes from the screen for the moment, look around the room that you're in, and notice all the blue things, right? Just look around, notice all the blue. Then we come back here, and I would say to you, I'm not asking for replies, but I'm saying to you, hey, can you tell me how many red things there were in the room? You'll be hard pushed to answer because you have, for that moment, putting your attention on a certain thing. You were looking for the blue, so you weren't as aware of all the other bits that were going on. And that's a really simple example to remind us that there's a lot happening in our world all the time. There's a lot happening in our body. There is no way humans can be aware of all the sensations that are in our body all the time. We'd go crazy. Similarly, all that's happening outside us. Multiple factors are happening. So the beauty of this framework of Cynefin is it's a tool to help us make sense of this busy, right? And say, well, what's going on in the context? So then I can make an informed decision about what sort of behavior I and the people around me should use to be able to get the outcomes that we want. So as I said earlier, a number of you will know about Cynefin. But there'll be some of you on the call that this might be the first time you've come across the framework. So I'm going to give a whistle-stop tour of what the Cynefin model is and how, and then after that, we're of course going to be focusing on that top left quadrant. So they've got this quadrants, and the Cynefin framework was put together by David Snowden. And if you're enjoying this and you're interested, I would encourage you to go and Google David Snowden. You can even go off and do, I think there's like a 3-day course on the model, like you can really get into it. But for now, it's just enough for us to say, there are times when you should collaborate and there are times when you shouldn't, right? So let's start looking at the quadrants. So the one down the bottom right is simple. So this is the situation, it's the domain of best practice, right? It's when things are known. There are known knowns, is a funny way to put it. There, you would have run things before, or other people would have run processes before, and they've been able to teach you. And there's a limited set of variables, and you know how to navigate them. And so when you're in a simple environment, for example, a very common example for simple is giving cooking, or gardening, or setting up a meeting, setting up a schedule, you have to get a lot of people together and they want to get a Zoom, so you send them a doodle poll. They're all simple tasks where there is a methodology and a process that's known. And the best behavior for those tasks is cooperation, right? And then we look up in the quadrant above, which is the realm of complicated. So in a complicated realm, this is when there are unknowns that are known about, right? So things aren't immediately visible. And so when you are in that realm, you need experts or technical advice or others who have been in the know before to assist. And I find this realm really interesting in the sense I think this is sometimes the instinctive go-to for a lot of things. So you'll hear issues we come across and people say, we just need to get more science. We need to get more data. We need to know more, as if that's going to be effective. And in some cases, and when they are truly complicated, it is effective. An example that's given for people to understand for the complicated is often a trip to the moon. And you think, what? A trip to the moon is huge. But when you think about it, trips to the moon have happened before. You get the number of experts in it. There is a certain methodology, and you need the behavior is to coordinate, right? You need incredibly good coordination to deal with the complicated space. Then we move to the complex domain, and that's the bit we're going to be spending most of this webinar in. And this is this domain where things are unknown unknowns, right? So there's lots of, and I will give a lot more detail on the next slide about complex, but this is the space where you need to collaborate. And what we sometimes find is we're in the space of complexity, but the behavior that's been taken is actually coordination. And this is quite common. And anybody who's on from central government, I'm not being rude. I've worked in central government as well. There is a tendency for some central government approaches to take a coordinating as if it's a complicated situation when it truly is complex. And you can understand that, you know, because when you're working in government, you have to lower risk factors. You have to try and have some sense of certainty and control. You've got to report to your ministers, and the ministers don't want to be caught on the hop, right? So it makes sense that even though it's not ideal, it's understandable rather than make sense. It's understandable that in government departments and in approaches to a lot of agencies, really, there's a tendency to apply coordination spaces rather than collaboration. But very quickly again, before we use the model, we've got this quadrant here of chaotic. And unfortunately, in our world, we know what this means. A lot of chaotic situations, natural disasters, violence, yeah, goodness. So many. Predicting future is quite chaotic as well, right? When you are in a chaotic quadrant, the most important thing, the best behavior, the only smart behavior is to quickly stabilize, is to make decisions that move you and the people around into one of the either complex or complicated spaces, right? So that's really important. When you're in chaos, you quickly respond, say, what do we need to do to move this to a place where we're going to collaborate? Or what do we need to do to move it to a place where we have to coordinate? Yeah, you can understand that. And then the bit in the middle is disorder. And that's just basically when you don't know what situation you're in. And I think that's useful, again, for all of you guys to take back to your networks and your groups and your teams. It's worth having a chat. Like next time you've got a team meeting, pop the Cynefin model and say, hey, where do we think we are? And knowing that everything is right, like it's epistemology, right? It's a model to get you thinking, because there's no real rights and wrongs, but it gets you thinking, and that your team makes a collective decision. Yep, we're in this world of complex, so therefore we need to collaborate. So a little bit more on this complexity. So complex problems need to be addressed as an open system, right? It's that there's many causal factors, the parts are all cocking off each other, and they require multiple worldviews. That's where the need for collaboration kicks in. So many examples of complexity. I feel, perhaps it's because this is what I work in, but I sometimes feel that we swim in a complexity soup half the time. And that's so fantastic that we have this approach called collaboration to be able to call on when we're in complexity. So again, thinking for you guys in your places, have a wee think about what you're working with. Are you going tick, 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 tick? Yes, there are lots of people involved. Yes, no one really agrees on the data here. Yes, there's no real clear solution, and there's a lot of values. Tick, 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 tick. You're in the right place. You're working with complexity. And so you want to collaborate. What does it actually mean, collaboration? So it's really, really simple. It means to work together. Yeah, it simply means to work together, which does make you wonder why it's so hard, right? But that's what we're talking about here today. So it's about this working relationship. The relationship is such a big word. More and more people are accepting that it's not just that soft skill that's the nice to have. Actually, relationship is the fuel, the flow that enables all wonderful things to happen. Yeah. And to interrupt all unwonderful, crappy things. And also another interesting word or useful word in here is the equal. That equality and equity is so important in collaboration. And it's that shared thinking, that shared planning, and the shared creation. That is what collaboration is. And people have all sorts of views on what collaboration is. And so what I think is quite handy is I'm just about to share a continuum from the Tamarack Institute, is to unpack again what other people might think collaboration means. Yeah. So you've got this continuum, and of course, none of these things are linear. They're shown in a linear form, or just so we can make patterns of it. Remember how I said we're in a soup of busy all the time and things going on? So therefore, as humans, we have to have patterns to be able to move forward. And so this is moving from on the space of competitive world where you're really protecting your turf through to the incredibly high trust place. And you'll see all those different breakdowns of the C words. There are so many C words, aren't there? I used to battle a bit against that, because sometimes you come across articles that talk about code. So, well, code's not even a word, but I think it's a cool thing. It's a trigger because it means that shared, that you are doing all these things. You're acknowledging that you're with other humans. You do coexist, and you need to communicate. You need to cooperate. You need to coordinate. And what we're looking at is what does it take to be right up to this high trust place of collaborate. Yeah. You can see how far along it is on the trust continuum. It's worth noting that it goes beyond. And I think, in terms of integration, I'm really pleased that this continuum does this because it reminds us of the role of time. So again, with collaboration, there is sometimes an assumption that once you start to collaborate, that's it. You have to be collaborating forever anō, ake anō. Well, not really. Because collaboration needs to be around a kaupapa, it needs to be around a purpose. And sometimes, quite appropriately, collaborations end. Job done, yeah? And that's healthy. It's a moving space. So let's break it down even a little bit more. You would have seen the communication, exchanging information, right? Two groups are together and one's going to be holding a public meeting. And so it lets the other group know. That's communication. Collaboration, if those two groups want to collaborate, they would have said, we're going to run the meeting together, and we would have had a few sessions beforehand to get something new out of that meeting, right? So again, that extra edge is you're wanting to have some generation come out of collaboration. It's a harvest piece. You're investing extra to collaboration because you're wanting to have something come out. That cooperation piece, remember I talked about cooperation as really with the simple space, and it's tried and true processes. Well, collaboration, there is nothing tried and true. So every collaboration is a bit different. And not only that, it thrives on those differences because it requires that spark of dissent, right? So again, for you guys in all your places and you're thinking about what you're dealing with in your situation, and there's some really annoying parts in it. Yeah. There's someone who always says things that don't help the day move. Well, bring those people in, they're the voices that you need. If you've got that happening, if you've got uncomfortable things going down in your collaborations, thumbs up, right? That's healthy, really, really healthy. And the coordination piece, again, remember I said coordination back on the Cynefin model was for when you're in the complicated quadrant and you want things to run well. You actually don't want that divergent insight when you go into the moon. You want things to be coordinated. But in collaboration, again, you're embracing it because you've built a space where there's room for divergence and spontaneity. Stuff happens and it's like, oh yeah, that's something new's come up. Let's go roll with that. So an example for me, I was thinking of, because it's always nice to hear some examples as well. I was helping a CE who'd approached me and wanted help to run his senior leadership retreat, team retreat. And he said he wanted a collaborative retreat and he wanted to run it. And so I went in and had a few coaching sessions with him. And quickly we uncovered in chatting, he wasn't talking about a collaborative retreat. He was talking about cooperation and coordination, right? That's what he wanted to do. But then when we really started talking, okay, what does he want to achieve? He did want to have that divergence and that dissent. And he wanted to have a safe environment where people could speak their mind, but he didn't know how to get there. So by unpacking all the parts that go involved in collaboration, we were able to build together an amazing run sheet for him, right? For him to run his retreat. And the retreat happened. And the feedback from the team was that it was their best retreat ever, and that they're still seeing outcomes from it because the team felt they'd been heard and they were able to do things differently. So about 10 years ago, I coined this little definition because it was just like, there is also another assumption that some people are good at collaboration and some aren't, right? Those people, they're good at the soft skills, let them do the people stuff. The reality is we all need to be good at collaboration. Every single one of us needs to be able to do this. So it is a skill that can be learned. And so I coined this definition that collaborative fitness, it's about developing the combination of mindset and practice to navigate that complexity. It's a will and a skill, right? I watched a super cool video the other day, and later on you'll see resources, and I've got the link there for you. And Rios Partners put it on, and it was 3 people on there. It was called Collaborative Action for Climate Action. It's like, wow, we all need that, right? And the speakers were from Walmart, from an investment firm in the UK, and from an energy firm in Africa. And I was seriously impressed by hearing the Walmart story. They're on this mission to decarbonize. Like they've got over 1,300 suppliers on this mission. And Kathleen McLaughlin from Walmart said, she summarized, she said, really, it's all about will, skill, and workshops. I'm like, cool. Now we know. Let's get to it, right? So let's have a look at this mindset thing a bit more, because it takes appreciative mindsets and deliberative practices to have the enduring solutions. To me, this is the really simple recipe for collaboration. Appreciative mindsets and deliberative practices to have enduring solutions. Mindsets, of course, are massively influenced by the lives we've all lived up to this point, right? Again, back to your own situations, think about the people that you're working with in your collaborative endeavor. There'll be a diversity in that mix. They haven't all led the same life as you. They won't have the same values. They won't have the same beliefs. Therefore, it is crucial that when you enter into collaboration, that everyone needs to be willing to be aware of their own mindsets, right? You've got to have that willingness for self-awareness. All sorts of things. When I do a lot of my collaborative work, I go on and on about 4 levels of listening, and I'm not going to here. I'm going to leave it as a hook to keep you interested. You might go and look it up yourselves. But you have to be willing to have deep listening, right? You have to be willing to be able to speak your truth in a way and in a place that might make you uncomfortable, because each of us needs to self-manage. Each of us needs to model these mindsets to be able to then collectively get us to a better place. So that's the mindsets piece, and we'll look more at them. And then the behaviors is the practices. These intentional things that we do make for collaborative fitness. So I've already talked about listening and speaking truth. Other things in mindsets are on this slide, right? You really need to take that leap of trust. And again, there's a lot written about this. I'm sure heaps of you have read about, the speed of trust and what it takes to, it's really quicker to lose trust than it is to build it, right? So again, remembering that time factor. Time is sort of like, if you're imagining collaboration as a river, and I'm making this metaphor up on the spot, if you're imagining collaboration as a river, and there's the various things in the river ecosystem that make it work, you've got the rocks in the river, you have the reeds on the side, you have the willow trees, depending what country the river's in. I think that listening and trust are part of those, and time are part of that ecosystem. Time. We'll come to that. So you got to invite people in, even when you're less sure about what to do. So there's a vulnerability involved in a collaboration. I'm reminded of a group I was working for. It was an organization that had about 120 contractors across the country. And they were undertaking a process. They were looking at their system. Because, of course, system change, complexity, and collaboration are all part of the same family, right? And so collaboration is the skill that we use to navigate complexity and have awesome system change. So anyway, back to this organization. They had all these contractors across the country, and they wanted to look at their system. And they wanted to do it in a collaborative way. And I was really impressed. I worked with them for a little bit of time, a few months, and the courage that was displayed by their senior leadership team totally met this appreciative mindset test. That they resisted the urge to do things for the contractors, right? Because that's, you're in your SLT, because you get to see the big picture. And so you do it for. Well, that can be very destabilizing and can limit the sustainability of that collaboration. So resist that urge, because you're choosing with your appreciative mindset to step into a collaborative situation. They were calm. I could see some of them a bit sweaty sometimes, but they were calm for information to be revealed that might highlight mistakes that the SLT had made. Yeah. And so they were doing all these things that showed that they had this willingness to truly be collaborative. And the outcome was phenomenal. And, those 120 contractors across the country felt valued, heard, and had added to a much healthier system moving forward. Okay, so that's mindset. And you remember what we're after here? We're after appreciative mindsets and deliberative practices. So let's look at these practices, right? So there are lots and lots of models out there in the universe of a way to hold a collaboration. Yeah, you might have heard of the term container. I personally don't like it because it makes me feel of a plastic Tupperware container with a lid. I just feel like, oh, that's too confining. So I prefer to use the word space, but it means the same thing. So there are different methodologies and frameworks to hold collaboration. One in particular that I'm a huge fan of is called Future Search. And at the end of last year, I did a Te Pūaha talk on Future Search. So, and if this interests you, I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that webinar because I co-ran it with my colleague from Te Rātua, Lisa McNabb, and it talked about a future search that we ran up in Te Oniroa Atohi, up in Northland. So that's a particular type of space for collaboration, and it's held over 2.5 to 3 days where you get the whole system in the room, right? But there's a zillion ways to run collaboration. So what I'm about to share with you now is a particular, it's a diagram that's from Twyford's. So Twyford's is an Australian company. I worked with them about a decade ago, and they specialize in collaboration. Super cool. And it was, personally, I reflect back on my years working with them, and I'm so thankful. I have a very appreciative mindset back then, because I got to work on every sector you could imagine, from town planning to teen pregnancy to regenerative environments, you name it. And I realized that whatever the sector, it's all about how humans use our skill to collaborate. So it was a really good training ground for me. I've since now tend to mostly work in the field that rocks my socks, which is anything to do with te taiao. Because I kind of feel like if we sort our connection as humans within te taiao of which we're part, we're going to be better off, right? So let's have a look at this container, because it is uber useful. So again, I know I've said this a million times, but think about the issue you guys are working with through these terms. So there's 5 steps in this, right? It's they call it, the Twyfords call it the power of code. There are 5 steps, they say, in good collaborative practice. That first one is commit to collaboration. Okay? You only want to be working with people who've said we want to collaborate. And commitment, don't need to say it, but I will. This is, of course, not linear, right? So you can see how it's got some circular stuff going, and each of them has got more circles. But there is method in this, that the first three steps, you see they've got their own circle around. I regard them as the foundation of good collaborative containers, good collaborative spaces, good collaborative practice. You got to pour your love into these first 3, right? So you commit. Everyone's in, checking mindsets, and that commitment will grow over the course of the action. So you don't just, yes, I'm in, sign on the line the first day, and then you forget about that commitment, because it will be tested, because we're human. We test each other. Then you've got that step of co-defining your dilemma. Heaha te kaupapa, right? What is it that we're working on together here? And that can take a heck of a lot of attention. Again, because we all think differently. And you have to check you're working on the same thing, because those assumptions are super dangerous. And many a time you thought you're working on one thing, and then you find out that the people in sales are working on something else entirely. Or, shouldn't pick on sales, but, co-define that dilemma. And then this next step, the co-design the process. Wow. I almost think this is a bit of a magic ingredient, and it's a step that's often missed. When you hear the words co-design, and co-design is another trendy term, and bring it in, the more co, the better. But when people are often saying co-design, they're talking about co-designing solutions. But what we're talking here is co-designing how we are going to work together. How are we going to do this? Bring up that example of working in teen pregnancies. It was absolutely crucial that the process for that collaborative process, how do we have this so that the teenagers are in the room all the time, that no conversations happen without the teenagers in the room? Because when those conversations happen without them in the room, it's no longer about that kaupapa. Yeah? And so you can hear that. So that particular collaborative process had to be designed that worked with their timing, going to places that work with them, places that were baby friendly, all those sort of things. So that co-design the process. So again, thinking about your work, check in. Are you doing this? Is everyone that you're working with, how committed are they? Are we clear what the dilemma is? Are we working in a way that is ensuring that we're getting the diversity of the ecosystem in the room for this? And once you've got all this, that's when you get co-creating your solutions. And that can happen so fast. Because when you have that circle, those first 3 running in an incredibly healthy way, there's high trust. Yeah. People are willing to come up with ideas because they know that all others are going to acknowledge where that idea's come from and give it a go, that you're not going to be bashed down. So again, time, let's bring back that time thing from our river of collaboration in. It can take quite a while sometimes with this early, these 3 steps. And you think, we're not getting anywhere. This is so frustrating. It's just a talk fest. What's going on? And then, boom, it's like magic. Sometimes I think it's like when your children are learning to read, and you're just going and you're sounding out the words and you're nothing, and it can take ages. Then all of a sudden, a sentence pops out, and then a couple of weeks later, they're in chapter books. It's that feeding, it's the tilling the soil that really, really needs to happen. So I'm thinking about another example. I was working on an island. Well, I still work on that island a lot. Waiheke, you would have heard it in my mihi. But this was the forming of the Waiheke Collective. This is about 6 years ago now. So it was a group of lots and lots and lots of different environmental organisations and tangata whenua who wanted to do things in a collaborative way, right? So in the early starting of this collective, and you can hear it in its name, this framework, the power of ko, was used. And not only was it used, it was up on the wall at every collective meeting initially in those first couple of years. And I was astonished, really. I mean, you hope for these things, but it's amazing when it happens, how it affected and assisted the collaborative fitness of all the people involved. I'd be in a room, and you got to the point where we didn't even refer to the power of ko, this container, but it was up there. But I'd hear in a conversation people chatting away, and someone would say, hey, you're going to solution. We haven't actually agreed what our kaupapa is here, and you've already jumped to solution. So they would be putting the manners, really, the collaborative manners on each other. Say, check, are we working on the same thing? Have we agreed how we're going to do it? And then, boom, let's go to solutions. It's really, really healthy. And another cool thing about having this container, this deliberative practice clear like this, you're unpacking rather than saying, we're going to collaborate, here's the time, we're all in a room, and everyone sits going, well, now what? There's methodology in this, right? Another useful thing about having such clarity on the inner working of collaboration is when new people come in, or when others who have been involved for ages leave. Again, I'm sure plenty on this call will be familiar with that piece where you've had a project going for, gosh, it could be 8-10 years, and then someone leaves the region, someone passes, something goes on, and things fall apart. Yeah. Or also maybe the situation where you've got new people join, and they've got their own ideas, and they're great ideas. That's why they've joined. They've been attracted to it. They want to be committed. But no time has been taken to bring them into that circle steps, right? Time hasn't been taken to check in that they understand what it is that people are working on, and they understand about how it works, and it can be very destabilizing. I was assisting a board, and it had been a long process prior to the board coming in, and they were hearing about what their organization had been working on. And there was one board member, this is an online meeting, who was very open that he had a different level of content knowledge than the rest of the board. There was an environmental situation, and he didn't have that environmental background. He was very open about that. But what was happening in the conversation is he was proposing solutions, the step 4, and critiquing solutions that were coming up without having this foundation. And so it was really destabilizing. Like watching it, you could see the other board members sort of, lights were going off, but you're in a situation, this is a fellow board member, and it's imperative then on everybody to go back to the guts and the core of that collaborative process. That board needed to go back and say, hey, what are we in here? This is the way we roll, checking we're all in. So it wasn't that that new board member was in the bad at all, right? The whole board needed to do a circle back on the what and the how and the why they were collaborating. So then they could all be creating these solutions. And of course, time. I've talked about time all the way along there. So that is a really useful practice. And yeah, I would encourage you to use it. You can always do with critiquing your own work. Yeah, check in how you're going with these things. And co-delivering actions doesn't mean you're over, because time moves on, things change, because remember, we're in complexity and everything's interdependent, and you have some solutions and you deliver some actions on something. Oops, there might be unintended consequences, right? They could be amazing, but they could be quite destabilizing. So that's when you loop around again. And I find that this diagram, this unpacking of the steps, I find it really reassuring that you're on track and you are making a difference. Because sometimes there are traps when you collaborate. Oh boy, let's have a wee look at this list. And are any of these in your situations? Yeah, that the first one, yep, human ego. We've all got one, right? Every single one of us has ego. And we are involved in these collaborative endeavors because we're passionate, right? And when we're passionate, sometimes our ego gets the better of us and we want to be the hero. Because, hey, quite often collaboration also involves a bit of voluntary work, doesn't it? Because when you're really passionate about stuff, you do this in kind. Such an interesting statement, in kind, because sometimes it doesn't feel very kind to yourself. But it's, again, check your ego, check others' ego, but in a nice way. And you can do that with this format. So if you're in a situation where you find someone's just gone off on their white stallion, woohoo, they're leading this thing, and you're like, oh, just a minute, you can have a conversation in terms of using their steps. You can say, hey, I just want to check in. This kaupapa that you're working on and what you're suggesting, is that activity and behavior you're suggesting in service of the kaupapa that we've agreed on? And you can even be more open to say, how is it in service? And in a really inquiring and non-threatening way. How is this action that you're proposing, that you think's on a bit of a white horse hero moment, how's it in service? And you might find that it really is in service and it was your own ego at issue. So again, the willingness of it and just being open to just being acutely observing the ego space that's always there. The time, refer to this all the way through. You do need that time for whanaungatanga, and the time for learning. Again, back to this, the loops, the feedback loops, the reflection, crucial. The learning and the time for it is always well invested. I've got decades of collaborative experience under my belt, and I'm convinced that time invested is always a factor that leads to transformative outcomes. It's never, ever a waste. Not investing the time can be sabotaging to enduring solutions. Taking the shortcut on that doesn't kick. But of course, again, back to this, things get quicker, right? So when new people come in, you've been working for 4 or 5 years, you've got some good stuff going, you're reflecting, you've got great practice, something happens that throws it all a bit, you will do those 3 steps a whole lot faster than you did initially, right? Because you're building off that previous layers of trust. So it's about working smart. Trauma, I think it's worth mentioning trauma, where I'm noticing a willingness more to name trauma. That is the reality, back to everyone having a different life experience. Trauma is always in the room. Yeah. When you first enter a room or even a space like this, there is a level everyone is doing a quick, and it may be unconscious. Am I safe here? People will be triggered by other things. Someone might be, I don't know, might have particularly big smile, which someone might have a bad experience with someone who's too full on, and that could just trigger them and they won't be able to hear anything that person says. So when you're collaborating, all I'm encouraging at this stage is be aware that trauma is in the room. right? There are a whole lot of tools, and it's another wonderful thing that CSI and Foundation North are investing in. It's called Homanu. And again, if you want to look at the CSI website, when we're really, really leaning into what does it look like to restore trauma at a collective level. But for now, for collaboration, what I'm saying is just be aware that's in the room, right? And so the better you build your container with your appreciative mindsets, the less likely trauma is going to be leading, right? Because you're building a space where people are going to be able to be their best selves. And these other ones of, well, there's traps. Just check you're not staying in paradigms that don't serve us. You know, just because you've always done it that way, be willing to look at it. The way, I mean, I keep talking about setting up meetings. I must be obsessed with that at the moment. But, you know, just check even something as simple as that. Are we doing it in a way that's working for people? Are we using the technology that's working for people? The times we do things, all that sort of stuff. And this last point, again, hugely important in our country at the moment. A whole lot of big terms here, recolonizing, decolonizing. Suggest that people do their work on this, and it's all about power and about willingness to strip it back, look at yourself, look at the way you're behaving, and just check you're not bringing back horrible rubbish, and instead you're focusing on nourishing the collective. Because it is worth nourishing the collective. It is worth collaboration. This photo is from the Waiheke Marine Project, and it was a future search, started the collaboration gig here, and I know there are people on this call from the Waiheke Marine Project, tēnā kōrua. And, you know, it is stunning when you have an entire system of deeply, deeply different perspectives choose to come together and then choose to keep working together, even though they fundamentally disagree on a whole lot of things, because there is that common kaupapa. So the appreciative mindsets are in there. They're well and truly set by that beginning process of the future search, and they've kept going. So it's been a good 5 years of that particular space. So, you know, so although collaboration is often uncomfortable, I associate it with hope and liberation. They're big words. I truly believe it. When we're in these spaces of such complexity, with the wars that are going on, with the absolute devastation that we are wreaking upon ourselves, you think about the levels of anxiety and depression, oh God, I'm not going to get caught in a doom list, but there's a lot happening in our world at the moment. That when you are collaborating with appreciative mindsets and deliberative practices, you get hope. And the liberation piece is that you realize that these issues are shared by a whole lot of shoulders. Yeah. Something I've noticed with this particular one, with this picture with the Waiheke Marine Project, that there are so many people involved in it that people can come and go and the movement keeps moving. Yeah. You know you're onto something good when your collaboration moves, kind of regardless of the personnel. It's just that it keeps moving. The river is flowing. So I have been really lucky with my world on how many different collaborative spaces I've been in. I was just sort of reflecting whether it's this one, the world of customary fisheries, town planning, tohero restoration, predator-free work, permaculture, you name it. That space of bringing appreciative mindsets together, of deliberately having practices that enable people to be their best selves, even in all this discomfort, is worth it and leads to transformative outcomes. So that's the end of our piece here. I'm just going to ask Michelle, and I don't think we asked people to put pātai in. So no, he pātai anō, Michelle? Carl?
No.
That's fine. So there is an opportunity here if people do have some questions just to pop them in the chat as they've been thinking. They might have been gosh, that really triggered. I've got this situation going on. What advice would you give? Or anything that came up for you, feel free to pop it in the chat. And while we're having a couple of minutes for you to do that, I will talk about some resources that we're sharing. Because one of the cool things about Te Pūaha Talks is that it's all focused on pragmatic tools and tips that you can then apply in your worlds. Yep. So before the end of this week, you will get these slides sent to you. Everyone who registered gets these slides and all these resources to explore. So because we've got a little bit of time here, I'll quickly whip through some of the resources, just a guide to which ones you might be interested in. So that first one is an Australian one, and they do amazing work, actually, the Collaboration for Impact, and they've got heaps of resources and tools. And because it's Australian, it's sort of like our near peer, so it's super useful in there. Focus is my own personal website in there. Future Search, again, is more about what it takes to bring the whole system into a room. And Future Search Aotearoa is CSI and Foundation North are investing in making it easy and accessible to run future searches in this country. The inner development goals are really interesting. There's a lot of people on this call who are involved in the world of te taio, of the environment. And so what that inner development is saying, the sustainable development goals, back from the Brundtland report, they haven't helped us really shift. Like, they're great. There's this acknowledgement that it's the inner work, that mindset space. So that's what the inner development goals are about. I love Network Weaver. She's just super clever. Lots of these ones you can subscribe as well, and you get lots of ongoing tools. Regenesis is also just stunning. For what I find useful with the Regenesis space is it really, really hurts your brain. And so if you're uncomfortable, it probably means you're learning something new, because they're saying you need to have a minimum of 3 ways of thinking about stuff, right? And that's, again, let's keep ourselves alive. Collectively as humans, we are producing outcomes that none of us want, right? We don't want all these children dying in Gaza. We don't want our oceans to be filled with sediment, but collectively we're producing this. So it's going to take collaboration to interrupt that and collectively produce outcomes that we do all want. Tamarack has already been referred to. Rios Partners, again, they're really focused on bringing lots of thought leaders together, and they share. Theory U is a wonderful one if anyone wants to go deep. And Twyfords I've talked about. So Michelle, he pātai anō?
Actually, there is one. Juliana would ask if she can share her, come off mute and ask her question directly. Would that be all right? Beautiful. Okay. Over to you, Juliana, if you're still here.
I'm here. Thank you. I was typing my question. So I work for, I'm leading Access Matters Aotearoa. We are a small nonprofit and leading a social change campaign. We've been trying really hard to pass accessibility legislation in New Zealand, because that's a precondition for the fulfillment of disability rights. And it's been really difficult to collaborate, really come together, all the disabled leaders in this country to advocate together. Do you have any insights to share how we can make this happen?
Yeah. So when you say difficult, has it been a difficult physically bringing to people together, or people wanting to come together?
Both.
So I suppose it would be a starter to uncover what is mattering to everybody and let them see each other, let them see that common ground, that the mattering. So have you been able to get that narrative up, rather than saying this is what's happening for we and that's why it's important, that you share lots and lots of narratives and people can see themselves and see that commonality. Does that make sense, Juliana?
Yeah, and we've been running the campaign since 2017. So we tried so many things, we tried so many strategies, and we haven't been successful so far. In a sense, we did had a bill introduced in the House, but it was absolutely poor. And then again, we campaigned really hard to actually, make that bill not go ahead. But now we need a new bill that is fit for purpose. And I had the opportunity to rub shoulders with the Minister for Disability Issues in an event last week. And one of the things that she said, the community doesn't have like a unity. You guys don't know, you want different things, you don't come together. So I know that this is one of the challenges that we have.
Yeah. I think also perhaps, Juliana, is finding systems within your system. If you're finding that looking at the whole is proving impossible, so maybe where there are willing energies, and you get those, another term is, fractals, and so you have work with the willing, and then you can have a real beautiful proof space without being so daunted about trying to bring the whole. Yeah, and then that can be very catchy, but also push back on legislation saying you have to prove that everyone's on the same page. Just don't let others set your terms of proof. Hey, I reckon we should perhaps CSI maybe do another whole session on everyone bring questions in and we can have a big yarn, because wouldn't that be cool? Because again, it's a collaborative space, and it's so, and again, liberating when you work with someone who's not passionately in your piece, because they can see things that you can't because you're so close to it. And that's another beauty of collaboration. So I do thank everybody for this hour investment. It's been a pleasure sharing with you. I'm going to hand to Michelle to do another quick little survey piece, and then I'll end us with a karakia. To you, Michelle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Miranda. There's some great other partai in the chat. Miranda's committed to answering those, and we'll send them back through email. So thank you, everybody. We just wanted a quick ask, please, if you would be happy to fill in our little short survey. We just want to keep being able to offer these that are really relevant to your issues and what's within your context and the things you're facing. So if you're happy to share your learnings through the survey and any suggestions for future, we would love that. Thank you for being here, everybody, and over to you, Miranda. Thank you.
Cool. And this karakia that I'm ending with is an absolute beautiful one, and I'm going to do what I don't normally do and actually give, I'll speak in Pākehā and Te Reo Māori. So, me inoi tātou. He awa tere tere, hoia te waka. He wero nui, hoia te waka. Kia ruku, kia kārewa, kia manawa nui. Tihei moody order. So a swift river can still be navigated. The great challenge can still be navigated. Dive, rise, be steadfast. Kia ora no mātua.